My name is Insane Raven, and I am back with another episode of IO Reviews! I'm gonna do more of these, he said, while still not doing any more of these than usual. Why do I try? No, but in today's episode, we are reviewing Justice League 2017. I have completely forgotten how to play this map, so do not mind me. No, but Justice League came out yesterday. Saw it yesterday. Making this video now. I made mistakes. So, let's talk about the movie. I'm going to be doing a spoiler review later on. Do not worry. For right now, it's all spoiler free. I would tell you when we go into spoilers territory because I'm not a douchebag. I forgot to open that up. Okay. So, let's talk about it. Biggest thing we have to kind of cover is how does everything flow? Is the pacing right? Because DC sucks with pacing. It's besides that and corny dialogue that doesn't make any fucking sense to get rushed endings. It's probably the biggest issue that they've had in the past with these movies. And surprisingly, I can say they don't fuck it up. The movie ends up being a lot of fun and stays consistent throughout the entire movie. Well, being a bigger DC fanboy than I think most of the audience who's gonna go see that, who is being drowned currently in Marvel products and Marvel lore, I understood a lot more of the characters than I think the average person does. But that's not to say that the movie doesn't explain everyone well. It's just saying for me, it explained it as well as I needed it to be explained. Almost as a quick refresher course of who's who. And if you're watching any of the TV shows, if you've ever seen a DC TV show, you kind of already know who's who anyway, so it's not that it doesn't become overbearing, the introductions to all the characters. Now, another thing that the DC movies get slaughtered on almost consistently is that they're dark movies and not really fun to watch. Well, this movie kind of changes that. It's still dark as fuck, and that's never going to fully change, if we're honest. But the jokes they put in are actually a lot more fun than I thought they were going to be. And it's something that I was kind of worried about when going into this, was especially after watching Thor Ragnarok, where the jokes almost seemed to I felt like they took me out of the movie at sometimes. I was worried about that. I was worried that, without the big man on campus, how things were going to go and how everything was going to work cohesively. Especially now since after Wonder Woman, the story's kind of changed from who's the starring role now. And you can agree with that. It definitely went from Batman and Superman's movie to becoming Wonder Woman's movie midway through. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. You don't really feel as if it's her movie throughout. It just kind of feels like there's more importance when she's on film. While she's not given any more extra time than anyone else in the film, her time just seems to be extra not wasted, if there's any other way to say it. Which is something that, again, the DC Universe needed if it was going to kind of pull off this intro movie. Now, the other thing that this movie does pretty well is because is keeping up the comparison with Thor Ragnarok. While Thor was an amazingly fun movie that derailed a little bit, this movie seems to stay way more on the path it's going to tell. It felt like it knew where it was coming from and going from the beginning to end, which was really refreshing coming from a DC film who has kind of fucked it up in the past. Not even kinda. Like, they've taken what should have been award-winning movies and fucked them up. So I was glad to see that they didn't do that here. Especially because I'm pretty sure if they did, the general public isn't going to give them another chance. Nor should they at this point. It's kind of gross. But let's talk about what the movie actually does. Because the movie covers its genre very well, which was another thing I was really surprised on. I walked into this movie fully prepared to be disappointed that I spent $13 on this film. However, I ended up walking away with a more of appreciation for what I saw. So let's actually go into the story now instead of the execution of everything. Well, story is pretty simple, and it's something that movie fans have been accustomed to at this point when they go see a superhero movie. An intro where they're kind of reintroducing everyone really quickly, and they kind of give each character enough time in these short little snippets to shine, give what you kind of need to know about them without giving too much. Barry Allen's introduction is based off much more of his father and how his father kind of is still that integral part of his life, even though he is in prison. And how he's kind of a shifty character. He doesn't really fit in here or there, but it's kind of just the character that's hanging out for the most part. You get Cyborg's coverage, where you see that he's become part of a shut-in. He doesn't really want to go out, which, as a fan of the Teen Titans original show, was something that I really loved. I loved that for the majority of the film, the majority of the film, almost up to the halfway point, he stays in his sweater, he stays in his pullover jacket, and it's kind of just hanging out. He does his comments here and there, but it's only until the first big fight that he kind of comes out of his jacket. Another thing that this movie covers really well is with reintroducing Diana and reintroducing Batman. Because they're already known in this world, they kind of just show up, and he's like, good. I didn't want to have to kind of play catch up. I wanted them to already be doing things, and we catch them in the middle of already doing things. We get an attempt at blowing up, I think it was a bank. I don't remember. I saw it yesterday and it wasn't important. It wasn't all that important. The guy tries to blow up a bank, and she's like, haha, no. And he's like, damn it, superheroes. And it's a fun little scene. The movie even gives a homage to Superman in this vertically filmed cell phone video where he's being interviewed by a couple of children for their podcasts, which I don't know, I found was way funnier than it probably was. But you hear this squeaky voice, and he's like, hello, Superman, can I ask you some questions for our podcast? And he's like, oh, you're adorable. And Superman is like, oh, well, if it's for your podcast, of course. And they immediately cover that, which was fun, how they did that, kind of showing how nowadays kids don't, keeping up with the times, kids don't want to have their shit signed, they want to do on video, and that was something that I really enjoyed, that they kind of showed off, that this isn't a DC from back then, it's DC now, and you kind of have to evolve with the times. It was a good little touch that I enjoyed. You get Aquaman's introduction that annoys me now that I'm thinking about it, because it's the exact, basically you watch the trailer, the Aquaman trailer, and it's basically that scene, which disappoints me. I wish there was kind of more to it, but it is what it is type thing. Moving on, here that there are these mother boxes, which I'm not sure if, that's what they're actually called. I've never read the comic book. I just know a lot about the lore because of TV and movies and the Arkham Asylum story arc. Moving on. But you have these mother boxes, and oh wow, I forgot about how it's only a 2-touch. The Amazons have a box, the Atlanteans have a box, and men have a box. And the men box has been hidden and stowed away for all of time. And by hidden and stowed away, I mean we buried it into the dirt. And the Amazonians and Atlanteans are actually protecting their box like champs. Make sure this big evil Steppenwolf doesn't ever come back. And I gotta say, that's a dumb name, Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf is your main villain. He's related to the Amazons somehow. It's not entirely clear in my memory. Something about being related to the Queen. I think it's like his son. But they act more like siblings. I don't know, it's weird. I probably just misunderstood it, but that's fine. It's cool. It's whatever. It's minor details. Minor plot details. It's not important. It's cool. Moving on. So Amazons have one, the Atlanteans have one, the men have one. And this plot kind of kicks off with Steppenwolf coming back saying, "It's been so long since you've invited me, mother." Oh, was father. Was a mother-son relationship. Things you learn when recording a video. And he goes on this full frontal assault, more female empowerment of the Amazonians kicking ass, which was something that a lot of people loved from a Wonder Woman. It was a bunch of badass female kicking warriors. I don't know why I said kicking. It wasn't important to that sentence, but moving on. Having them all interact again, it's really cool seeing. You also get to see the power of Steppenwolf. He's exactly as strong as World War I German army. Yay! So then he disappears, and this Greek lantern is shine, and Diana is like, "Yo, Bruce, that war you've been talking about that you think that's gonna come, it's here. We have like 3 days to save the world." Last time he wanted to fight. This time he's just gonna kill everyone. So we should probably be on the up and up of that. And that kind of sends him into this tailspin of picking up everyone. Picking up the rest of the members of the Justice League, with the exception of Aquaman, because Aquaman's already been talked to, and Aquaman and Batman don't get along, which is fine. As they kind of move on, and as you kind of continue to fill out the roster of everyone, you start to see their individual personalities. Cyborg and Flash are super young, and kind of have this fish out of water, where the accidents attitude, which is something they actually say that as they're digging up something. They say how they're the accidents in it, and it's nice that you kind of have these touches where it's like, oh yeah, not everyone's a god on this team, right? It's a nice little reminder that up to that point I had almost forgotten because between Batman and all of his gifts and Wonder Woman kicking ass and Cyborg kind of being godly with his power over technology, you kind of forget that, oh right, he's just a kid. Whoops. So as that kind of continues, we see that the Atlanteans are getting their ass kicked by Steppenwolf as their mother box is then stolen, and forces Aquaman to join the fight. After being spoken to a character of, I'm assuming is important to the comic books, but I do not know who she is. And she's kind of just an Atlantean chilling in armor. And then she's never brought up again. I don't know. It's told he shows up in the first encounter of Steppenwolf versus the Justice League. Not all members pending. And you kind of get the gist of how strong Steppenwolf is and actually could be, and why it took 3 entire armies to take out the dude the first time he came to planet Earth, because of course it was the first time. He then joins the battle as they all interact for the first time, giving us a lot of the trailer moments of flying through the power plants, the radioactive power plants, and other fun stuff. Coming out of that, we discover that everyone's kind of now on the same team and on the same page of, yeah, this is bad, we should fix this type thing, which is good. I like it when my heroes actually act like heroes. And as they begin to discuss their plans for what they must do, I have forgotten about the Mog Ball. What they must do as to kind of act this great evil that's befallen them. One of the characters, I forget who, please forgive me, brings up the revival of Superman and how it's not an option anyone wants to take necessarily, but it might be the only option they have. Which causes the characters to start infighting amongst themselves, which is something to expect at this point, but I wish they could have avoided somehow. It just seems to be like a page straight ripped out of Marvel's book, and I wish there was more we could do with these characters, but this being modern day cinema, we really can't. So that is disappointing. The infighting breaks out, and that doesn't start the fight with fists, but with an intellectual debate of what the risks of bringing back Superman would be. And yada yada yada, if it's worth it, and all this other fun stuff. As you kind of continue through that storyline, you start to see that, they kind of screwed either way they pose it. And it's just a matter of time before everything dies. Just everything dies. As at this point, we start learning what the risks really are and what Steppenwolf's grand plan is. And this is one of the issues that I have with the movie. His plan is more or less what General Zod's plan was from the original Superman film. Created some things, turned planet Earth into a second home. You know, not great, but not a great storyline, and kind of bored me in response of, well, we've seen this before, what else do you have for me type feeling, which I wish they would have, would have thought outside the box for this. I mean, two supervillains and they both have the same plans. You're not doing that great, kid. And that's kind of where we're left off with what the big issue is and how the majority of the plot goes. Now, one of the things we kind of have to talk about is the pacing of it. And I do have some issues with the pacing. Now, it's not so bad at the point where it's distracting or things don't seem to make sense, but there are certain things that just feel a bit too rushed by the final acts, where everything in context and then the moment makes sense. When you start adding up all the pieces, they start to not make so much sense, which is disappointing. But that's being real nitpicky of it more than really anything. And it's something that you should think about when I say this, when I go into these reviews. That is a really nitpicky thing, and it wasn't distracting at all when it comes to my enjoyment of the film. All in all, I thought the film was a lot of fun. And it's definitely a film that people are currently hating on right now. And I think that might be more of because it's fun to shit on DC rather than there are actual problems with this film. I enjoyed it a lot. I felt that the jokes, while not as good as the one in Marvel, kept me involved in the world more than Marvel more than Thor Ragnarok's jokes did. And maybe that was the great comparison they were going for, was how far can we push this? And I feel like they did it right. They did the movie justice. I'm excited for the next one. I'm excited to see where they plan on going with this franchise. And I hope that they go to places big. But that's going to be it for my spoiler-free review. If you want to see spoilers and want to hear more about the spoilers, don't be here. Go somewhere else. You got 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Cool. Let's go. Alright, so spoilers. So with all the risks taken account for, infighting happened and some really mean words being said in regards to Steve, the Justice League goes and says, we don't have a choice. The only way we're going to defeat Steppenwolf is if we bring in the big gun, being Superman. That then becomes a fight. That then becomes a fight as Superman does not return with all of his memories, and regards only comes back with some of them. And we see just how fast he is as he takes on the Flash head on, as he then fights Wonder Woman hand to hand and kind of beats her ass in, which I'm surprised they kind of went there with that. I was fully expecting them to kind of pull back away from having one of their heroes beat the crap out of Wonder Woman if they were going to do this infighting thing. And while I'm might be overhyping it a little bit, because their main one-on-one fight is really just a headbutting competition, which I really enjoyed. It does show you how strong Superman is and how he has every intention of laying her flat. And she does. While it is a little bullshitty how it happens, the fact that they go into this headbutt competition expecting to be stronger than all shit, and instead Wonder Woman ends up just kind of like staying in the concrete. And it's a scene that I really enjoyed. It's something that I enjoyed because of the risk that they took going there with their main character, with Superman, the Golden Boy, going after Wonder Woman. And I'm kind of taking on that, hey, when our guy's bad, he hits women too. Which is something I thought they'd pull back from, and I'm glad they didn't. Because that's equality. You want to be a superhero, you're going to have to take some punches. Oh, did that make it sound like I endorse violence against women? I don't. Women are the best. I've dug myself into a hole. They do their fight, and then they learn where Steppenwolf has been hiding out, which is in Russia, for all places. You have a nice joke of how Batman's technology isn't good enough to get them there in time, because they're all on a 3-day time limit, like it's Majora's Mask up in this bitch. And Cyborg's like, nah, I got it. Don't worry about it. Let's go. And they get in Russia with plenty of time to have the final encounter with Steppenwolf, and apparently the Upside Down. It's very confusing why that was the aesthetic they went for. But hey, aesthetic's got an aesthetic. So they have this big fight. It looks really cool. You get to see how all of the team starts kind of working together. And one of the things I really have to give this movie credit to, as much as I almost don't want to, is that they managed to capture how every character fights almost perfectly. I feel like there are certain characters within Marvel's lineup of heroes that kind of get muddled after a while. And I enjoyed that there was never moments in DC where I felt like that kind of showed. You know, each of the characters have or like kind of or tripping in personality, dripping in personality when it comes to like their movement styles and their combat styles, and it's something that coming from DC I wasn't expecting, and I was prepared to hate. Because after all, DC hasn't done anything right with its cinematic universe since day one. But it was another one of those things where I was surprised to see how well they made it work. You even get these moments where in these really intense moments of how they fight to these smaller moments of jumping over a gorge where they just use their abilities to jump over and say, screw it, type things. It was amazing to kind of see. It was amazing to kind of see how it all worked out. And it's something that I really enjoyed watching. But each one of there are moments in the fight that could easily be comic book pages, whether it be Aquaman riding a parademon down while having his trident, stabbed in it and yeehawing like a cowboy, to Superman coming back and being reborn and just like floating there. They did a lot of things that I was surprised how well they come off. Now, my bias here might be that every movie in the DC cinematic universe has been a disappointment in one way or another, and I'm therefore grading a decent film as better than it deserves. And I'll listen to that argument, and I'll even say it's valid. But I do feel like this movie was better and keeping me immersed and keeping me in the movie than the last couple of Marvel movies were, which is saying a lot. I feel like if DC continues on this path that they're going, that they might actually have movies contending against Marvel in the future. Now, I have to talk about the end credit scene, and I'm talking about the end credit scene that means something. The one where it's actually a big deal, and I have to talk about it. And I am, of course, talking about the one at the very end of the film, where we find out that Lex Luthor has broken out of jail using a bald stunt double, and Slade is now, using his Teen Titans name, Deathstroke is now hanging out in Gotham and is now posing a threat to all. Good classic clean stuff. Good classic DC stuff. Well, with these revelations now, and so there really is only one thing that can happen. And Lex Luthor goes, I'm celebrating God's return. And God apparently has a league of his own now. Well, you know what? Why shouldn't we have a league? If you don't know what that is because you're not a DC fan, he is referencing the League of Doom, which is basically a league of supervillains, like it sounds. And I don't know. I don't know with this direction. I don't know that this is where I want them to go. I was kind of hoping to get Darkseid, like I'm assuming many others were. They were assuming and hoping for Darkseid. But nope, we have the League of Doom, which is weird. It's weird that that's where they're going with this film. With the next film. So I'm hoping what they've kind of realized is that with choosing a world-ending event to kind of start off their show, they've already painted themselves into a corner. So they kind of have to backtrack and choose something less intense for the sequel. I'm hoping that's where they're going, and they didn't actually think that this was going to be a place that made sense. And I hope that they can steer this back in the right direction. I left the movie feeling very hopeful. I left to that end credit sequence very nervous. Almost to the point where it kind of re-put in the show, the entire movie back in the context of, well, was this as good as I thought it was? Because that's a dumb decision they've made. And I missed that by seconds. That was a dumb decision they made. So, time will tell if DC is actually in a place where things make sense and they're going in good directions, or if they're still bumbling idiots who need to figure out how to franchise. But that's just my opinion. My name's been Insane Raven. If you thought I was too rough on the movie, or if I thought I was going too gentle, let me know in the comment section down below. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye-bye.